Welcome to the J3U University Podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and to bring the highest level of competitor to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. Peaking before peak week. What the luxury to have, right? A lot of people have just planned out their timelines to hopefully you even land in peak week being stage lean, ready to implement your whatever strategy you're going to roll the dice with, hopefully not roll the dice. And the kind of luxury is getting ready ahead. But the thing on this episode we want to cover is what you should actually be doing when you are at that point. And I think there's a big psychological piece to this as well that a lot of athletes struggle with that we want to touch on, and then get into some of the nuts and bolts of what are the first actions that we take to kind of begin the peak week actually before you even hit peak week. So Luke, how's it going, my man?
Yeah, man, it's the season of peaking right now. So it's just like rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I'm on like week 6 or week 5 in a row of shows this weekend. So it's a great thing to think about here, because I think your emotional statement is where I think starting off the conversation is huge, because it sets the stage for the problem that we're trying to solve. And if the athlete is fully bought in from the beginning of prep, it makes it much easier to understand why the rate of loss might be a little bit faster at the beginning, why it seems like you're ahead relative to different preps you've done in the past, especially if it's their first prep with you. And the problems that you're going to solve by doing this, that we're going to dive into today's episode, is going to allow you to not only be in shape on time, but eventually present the best physique on stage. Because in my opinion, the first time that you reach true stage conditioning during a dieting process is not the best that visual can be. I do think that it takes some time there to remove kind of the fatigue stringy look that pulls off, which is, a little bit more of an anecdotal take on that. But we have to remember that coaching is an art of both data and PubMed and things that we're taking actions from on that front, and also looking at what we're coaching right in front of us and being able to make anecdotal decisions based on that. So this is something I'm pretty passionate about, is running peaks like this, because it just makes peaking easy. It makes it really hard to miss. And in my opinion, it puts the best version of the athlete that you're trying to prep on stage.
I thought you said you brought up PubMed. That's funny. And it made me think of I'm doing a PubMed prep. It's science-based. It's like, okay, you probably won't be ready if that's all you're doing, PubMed prep. But yeah, I think with earlier on, depending on, different situations and your coach that you do have in place, a lot of people run into that. Like your first few preps, just like mine, feels like the gas pedal had to be pushed down all the way into that kind of Monday of a Saturday show. And so that's what's kind of normalized, of feeling like it's always this grind. And finally you're like, 7 days out, we can finally take the breather. So if that's not happening and it's earlier on outside of that 7 days, psychologically, it makes you feel like if you're not working harder all the way up, that you're not bringing something better. And I think for especially like the type A individuals, that they're all about pushing harder and it's really hard to get that person to pull back. That is a huge barrier to realize that your prep should start feeling easier as you kind of like lead in to peak week. And there should be a tapering of the kind of the grind feel into this relaxed, empowered state. And I think that's another big piece of once someone finally lets go of the reins and trusts that process to happen, that you do empower yourself with confidence and reduce a lot of the stress, starting to see the physique transform. And you said the anecdotal aspect of it, it takes quite a few days to bring someone out of fatigue. And absolutely true for a lot of people grinding down, sometimes 7 days isn't enough, and you do need more time. But when you give that person more time, they drop off that fatigue, they start feeling really good, and the physique really does fill out, and you start getting the even harder look because now the muscle's pushing against the skin. But man, the boost of confidence you can get from that going into peak week, when you start to see the same visuals every day of like, wow, I could walk on stage like this. This is the best that I've ever looked. Versus, the norm of what we've seen of your not really seeing that to maybe like a couple days before the show, because the beginning of peak week is just all that fatigue drop, or a lot of people not seeing it to their second show. And I think that's even more common. Their second show's their best because they finally got to rest over their post-show period bit, get back home, they had some food, and then finally that next week they're like, wow, now I'm really starting to look on the money. And that can come down to like, oh, you needed more time dieting, or you needed more of the rest time and eating than what you had allocated for that first show. So a lot of this can be a huge empowerment to the athlete, also to the coach as well, especially if you're a neuro coach and have that opportunity to do so, of being able to start testing the look earlier on versus kind of seat at your pants. I hope I see the look come about and we drop off enough fatigue early, right? What other psychological aspects do you see around this, Luke, that I kind of wasn't touching on, or was that it?
I think there's a psychological component on the athlete side to understand that you kind of see the stage visual a few times before you're on stage too. It's pretty cool to see, like kind of seeing someone like really, you've seen it before, like you've been there, you get to full contest shape, you're starting to pull back, you're doing some food testing with some loading. You just get that one shot in the gym that's like the right lighting, and it's like you're full enough to kind of see that condition sign through. And it's extremely motivating, and almost like not only do they start to feel better because you're pulling back on the variables, but it's almost like a remotivation type of a deal. And I think from like managing an athlete perspective, it's like I have one prep in particular right now that I can think of as this guy's first prepping with me, and he has been amazing. He's just executed everything so well. But he's a coach himself, right? So he wants to learn through the process. He asks great questions, and one of the things he keeps bringing up is he feels like he's ahead of schedule, right? And I'm like, yeah, you are ahead of schedule. I'm like, but that's purposeful. Like, you're going to get ready. You're going to be ready way ahead of time. And then I'm going to be able to lay off the gas, and you're going to be way fresher. You're going to have a much better visual than if I tried to land this 5 days out. Right. And so the emotional aspect of that on the back end is like, he's going to start seeing those visuals, what they're going to look like on stage when he gets 4 weeks out. And it's going to be a remotivation factor for him those last few weeks to get through it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think there's another psychological case here where you have the one that wants to push hard all the way, but also the one that is not quite ready and might want to pull back early. And I think there's a point to assess and say, like, are you stage lean or not? And you do have to be able to accurately assess that. And have been watching yourself close enough leading up to that 2 week out mark to start really being able to make the call and looking at someone in their fasted state, post-workout, maybe at another time of day. And then what I like to do is assess for biofeedback as well, and then look at systemic condition and localized areas. And so what I mean by that is if they don't look extremely crisp in all areas, are they highly fatigued? And so you have someone like they do feel pretty run down, like, hey, how do your quads feel heavy? Do they feel hard to contract? And maybe we see some females too, like just their quads are blurry, but then they turn around, like they have glute lines and like that's all on par, but we have a localized aspect that's not quite conditioned. Then if you have the biofeedback of that, they are feeling, heavy on prep and legs are hard to contract, that's a fatigue thing than they are conditioned. And so I think you start assessing that piece to make sure, like you do push someone far enough, and don't pull back the reins too early on someone. I think a lot of people are like, well, I need to be ready early, so I'm just going to pull back. It's like, it's still like the better case to get more body fat off the last week versus like pull back and drop off fatigue. Because we still have strategies, and we talked about this on previous podcasts, of how you can really hit someone hard with fatigue drop in 7 days. You just have to do it in the right way. And so but we're talking about a better case situation here of you're already early and able to start, tapering back. But that's what I would start looking at the assessment piece of, is there more fat to lose, or is this just water, masking fat loss that's been present. And then we have to bring up like the PED aspect, because that can blur some things too. And why we teach this is trying to, that 4 to 5 week out mark, start being able to tweak around with your PEDs and test some different things, like using AIs to, drop estrogen acutely, or even, shifting growth hormone down and back up, to see if those things do change the look and bring more condition from just a water drop perspective. And then if that is the case, then we ride out that stack design into this kind of 2 week period. So we've already removed one variable of water that we won't have to sort later on, and then come to find out that, oh damn, that wasn't water, that was body fat to still lose. So that's in like that 3 to 5 week out period. We want to make sure we have that like very, very well sorted. And ideally, you're already running like a PD prep stack that would already align with what you want to be able to have for assessing accurate visuals. But I think that's the other piece I need to bring up as the person that still needs to keep pushing, and to not be too, reserved in doing so. But I don't know if you have something else to add, but I was going to jump to, we can, like once you are there, what do you do? The nuts and bolts of it.
I was going to pivot it. I was going to tee it up like a T-ball and let you take it off, but we'll do that now. One of the biggest things, like, let's assume you run the ideal prep, right? And you're there, and you're kind of at that point where you need to start tinkering with some of the variables. I always go towards, and tell me if you think differently, activity reduction to gauge how much that improves the visuals first, before I then go into testing food and or PEDs typically. So at that point, I'm just trying to gauge like, what is the fatigue depth that I'm paying off, like straight out of the gate? And then getting that gauge of like, how far does that weight tend to shift is always kind of my first go, which is typically done via de-output days and a couple other things from like a training, pulling some volume and some reps in reserve. But that's always typically my first move. And then one other thing that I like, and I'm going to let you kind of dive into this, is testing the loading strategy. So we talk about this pretty in depth in level 1. We talk about like in the training side, like how to do the more aggressive fatigue drop versus the less aggressive versions for the preps that are running a little bit closer. But there are different loading styles that could help with different looks. So you have some people who are going to front load and need to wash it off. You have some people where back load works. You're going to have some people where linear loading works. And by being ready early, I think you get some really, really good data on how these visuals look. And I've actually done this recently. The peak week sheet we use, I've started using further out so that I could start to mark down like differences in loading metrics, depending on kind of how I see someone's visual shift.
I want to pull something out of what you said just to give clarity, people, because I just mentioned like adjusting PEDs like 3 to 5 weeks out. And you said like you drop output before like PD adjustments. So
yeah,
I know we're talking about slightly different things there, but do you want to give some clarity to people that were listening to the difference in what we're bringing about there?
Yeah. So more so like with the PED changes, I'm like modulating stack design in order to kind of see like how much fluid retention is affecting the actual visual portion, but I'm also trying to delineate how much of that is fatigue as well. So a lot of times, like I'm doing that de-output before I even start like the full testing process. And then as soon as that's done, which is 2 days, 3 days maybe, that's when I'll usually do PEDs kind of out of the gate, which is going to be removal of GH or titration down in GH or testing some AIs or things along those lines that John had mentioned. But I'm basically just trying to be a little bit more differential on what's driving the change in the visuals by doing one before I do the other and not doing them both at the same time.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3 University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3 University. Let's get back to today's podcast. Okay, maybe I guess we differ then in that approach, because I'll mess with the PED stuff pretty earlier on, to then once I do get to peak week, or the 2 week out mark, right? I can then like do the de-output piece, and I have enough time because some of that stuff, it's hard to adjust last minute, right? Like if you have an AI put in and you see it drop, like you can't really adjust stack design in 10 days to see testosterone play out. Growth hormone's different though, but I think whatever your approach, you are implementing one variable
at a time. Yeah.
So if you want to check PEDs, do that early in one phase, and then if it's like de-outputting rest days, then you're doing that in another. And I think along prep, and getting back to your question, Luke, around like the refeed strategy, is that you'll start picking up on all these things, on which variable is impactful. And so you'll have like the individual that you're seeing after, say, a string of 3 training days, their weight's up after legs, and then 2 days later they drop. And maybe that's after a rest day. Or maybe you've implemented some de-output days along the way of like, hey, let's do 2 rest days back to back. Then that on the 3rd day, they check in and they wake up looking really hard and had dropped weight. So you're like, that should like start sending, a light bulb to go off that, all right, this is someone that, training and output really drives a lot of fatigue, and the de-output is the big variable to play here. Or we see the individual where I've seen different strategies here, like where I have guys doing infrequent like injections, and the day after their shot, their like weight's up and they look more watery. And it's like, like this is a testosterone piece that should be adjusted. And that's when it already happens earlier on. Or the other situation, refeeding. We'll, of course, towards the end of prep, like bring in more refeeds, start slowing down the deficit, and you could have some refeed data now present too. So if you have someone that refeeds, maybe the day after they don't look their best, but then 2 days after they look really good. You're like, oh, okay, like this is someone that, could maybe work well with the backload of just doing a Thursday load, Friday kind of, just maintenance, and then show day they land their best look. Or we have other situations with a few people where, man, you feed them and it's like nothing sticks, and you feed them more the next day and nothing sticks. And you're like, wow, like this is someone that's going to take a long time to load, and you might need to hit that person with the front load. So like 6-7 days out, load them really hard to catch them up a bit, drop off fatigue, and then it's more coasting the rest of the week. So with all this of like, what do you do once someone's already ahead? You should have been like picking up these pieces of like, what is the more impactful variable for them to implement to drop off fatigue. That is the kind of goal here. But I would say we default towards output first, as that's usually the one that is we really see makes the biggest difference. And also I think it's less variable with holding nutrition more steady during that time. And you're not seeing like fluctuations as much with carbohydrate and water swings. And I would bring up, and so last thing here, I'll throw it back to you, Luke, is that is even more so the default for the weight class athlete that is above weight. Because if you start, I need to drop off fatigue, I'm going to bring food in, that's going to increase glycogen, increase weight. And what is going to be more impactful is dropping down output and holding food low. And that way you actually see body weight start dropping typically doing that process. So making it easier for this individual to make weight versus feed them more and keeping output high.
Man, weight class athletes are special ones, like ones that are real close to the weight cap. Like they're special ones to prep and peak. Just for some clarity too about kind of what I was saying earlier, like I still do that PED drop like 5-ish weeks out, like the testing for it. I'm just like going into that. I want to see like what change is the actual PD drop going to create. So I'm trying to have a clean slate heading into that drop. But man, I really think like when you start to kind of look at mapping all of this out, it really becomes simpler when you have someone ready before, because what you start to learn as a coach is that the extremes of loading in most cases don't exist as long as you have control over the other metrics. I do think there are people who need front loads and days of being pretty aggressive to kind of like settle them down, like especially on the faster metabolic side. But man, when you do it far enough out, it allows you to just really coast. And I think that's the piece people miss, right? Is because like, sure, it may take a day or 2 days, maybe even 3 of you being pretty aggressive or progressively aggressive to kind of stabilize them. But then once you do that, you're not continuing that all the way into the show, right? It's like you stabilize them, you get them up, and you can hold them pretty easily and coast them. And that's kind of like the classic front load that you'll see is sometimes needed to stabilize someone out. But that's where I think people miss it. It's like you don't need as much as you think you need once you get someone stable.
Oh man, rewind that and hit it play again on it, because it's so true. The majority of people that I peak that are ready, like fatigue's dropped, we are coasting on the same diet nearly all of peak week into the show with just some shifts. And that's plenty full for most people. And doing like, well, I'm on 300 carbs, now I need 1,200 grams of carbs to load. That's such a rare case to ever see that. And usually that is rolling a dice and you're having to clean someone up on right after they do that load. And it makes it really messy.
Oh, so messy.
I just had, Sean Howley, he did, his show, and we're rolling into Masters, and he's been ready for a few weeks now, just his baseline diet. And he is the guy on 1,200 grams of carbs, but that's his baseline diet. We literally got up and had his normal, 2 meals and just went on stage because we just knew what that looked like, and the fatigue was already low. Other situation, like Colton, our coach, he was cruising on a little over 400 grams of carbs throughout his peak week, but he actually started really relaxing towards the end of the week, and then had some metabolic speed up going on. So it turned into looking like a backload, but his visuals were already good. It's more of just keeping up with maintenance for him. So you could say oh, well, you backloaded him. Well, not really. It was more just keeping up with the visuals that were already looking really good after a few meals. So, even in those cases, that's really what that kind of ends up looking like. But the big loads, because we get that question a lot, when do I start my load? It's I think that you're starting with the wrong question if you're asking that. And these should be giving you better clarity before you even get into peak week in this approach that we're doing with assessing and starting the D output. But look, let's talk about this here, because let's give someone an example. You have your athlete, they're on whatever macros you want to say, doing 15,000 steps a day. They're doing 45 minutes of cardio. They're ready. What's your first approach here with this person? And let's make sure we have 80 micrograms of clenbuterol in there. There's fat burners. So where do you start? What's the D output look like?
Yeah, so I get pretty aggressive here. I just want to see if I shift them off on base diet, are they going to move? In which direction are they going to move? And that's going to be step reduction. So 15,000, I'm going to be pulling back to 10 or 11. I'm going to be full removal of cardio for 2 to 3 days. I'm going to keep them on their baseline diet, and I'm just going to let them rock and see what happens.
So baseline, this is still if they have a training day diet, they do the train day. If they have their non-train day diet, they do their non-train day.
Yeah, and what you actually see happen here is this happens pretty much every time, is you no longer need the rest days. You just kick them up to the training days and hold them there pretty easily. So if you have a split diet, you can just kick them up to the training day after that first initial, because it's closer to their maintenance, and then you can start to kind of really get dialed in on what their maintenance is, and then slowly tick it up. And it's funny you say this. I've actually had less preps this year where I've done 2 meal plans because of this. Just for the accuracy of what is the actual deficit, what is the actual maintenance, what is the actual surplus that pulls someone up. It makes building the matrix for peaking so much easier, and the decision-making happens much quicker because you're very clear on what, not only what's going in, but you're not playing this averages game, right? You're playing one meal plan all the time and modifying off of that. Not saying training day and rest day diet doesn't work. It absolutely does. I'm just saying I found myself shifting into more single day plans recently because of that accuracy in this portion of the process of being able to move someone up to maintenance or even higher if I need to pull them back up.
Yeah, I have that with a lot of athletes as well, or the discrepancy is just not that vast anyway.
Yep.
And even then, when you think about how we program training, is like volume comes down quite a bit. So training is not that high of expenditure anyway.
Yeah.
And then keep in mind, everyone, that your rest day is still a recovery day. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people training at night, like that bleeds into your next day. So having a more even diet split absolutely works and can make the assessment process a little cleaner. I think the thing here is, like, if you have that real extreme approach of like really high training days into very low off days, is where you probably wouldn't be going just straight to your training day diet.
Yeah, that's
more of a case of like if you're running kind of a milder caloric rotation here. So that would be the case. And also where even as I get into peak week, start having guys almost train every day, just shorter sessions. And then it just makes everything a bit more standardized with output and input. So you implement this the first 3 days, cardio's off, steps drop down to like 10,000. They're on this base diet. From there, I guess you're assessing like what was the response? Did they drop? Did they hold? And from there, is that when you start bringing up food, when steps have gone down to a maintenance? And do we call maintenance, hey, less than 10,000 is pretty doable?
Yeah.
Or do you have people that you do need to shift back up?
I do have people I need to shift back up. Sometimes it's really like once I pull that assessment, I kind of see they're not, like I'm thinking there's more fatigue than there actually is. They rinse it off. They might drop a pound or two, but there's still more body fat to come off. That's the person I kick back up back to the deficit and like let them keep running. But really what I'm trying to do in the first load is spill them. So like if I know someone is ready, I need to know where they spill and where the visuals start to go negative from a fullness perspective. So I switched to daily check-ins at this point, not for the rest of the prep necessarily, but at like this like testing phase, because I'm basically giving them their diet every day until I see them spill. And then once they spill, I can pull them back on that deficit plan, rip it back down, and then just kind of find my maintenance baseline there. And so basically I'm just trying to create my matrix of what is the top end of where these visuals start to go down right now, because what it does is as you go the last few weeks, it just kind of notches down, right? Like you get a little leaner, that weight cap notches down, So you kind of start to get a very good accuracy of like how quick someone can spill on you. It also, what it does is by doing it that way, I've dropped the fatigue. If I plug in food and someone speeds up, I know that that's going to be the issue. I'm going to have to chase someone. It's more so I'm more doing it from the fact that if I have to chase someone, I need to know early rather than I'm not worried about it all rinsing some fluid off someone if they're already ready.
I got you. So you have 3 days, outputs pulled out, they're on the base diet. Food will start incrementally increasing, then day by day you're watching to the fasted look might start getting a little softer.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're watching them a little bit during the day too for that, because
usually
lately if they're midday,
yeah,
spillish and like, well, they could go on stage a little bit before that and look good, then you probably don't need to take them all the way up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm getting different time points, different days usually.
Sure. And then you can then pull back the diet, you have your maintenance, and now we kind of cruise into peak week on that. So I think that is the peak before peak week, kind of simple nuts and bolts of it. Somebody will ask, like, do you move carbs? Do you move fats? And I would say typically I always shift up towards carbohydrate first, as that's what is going to be impacting visuals and training and recovery the most. So that is the initial shift always. In your rare cases, like we have someone that needs a ton of food, fats might start moving up. That's when I find the carbohydrate volume is starting to become too large, that you're having bloating, not bloating from like GI issues, but more so just there's a lot of food volume present. I think the last piece that I would bring in here is that Another piece to consider output-wise is going to be posing. And posing would probably this week had been at its all-time high. This could be 3 sessions a day of doing 4 rounds of posing. And you should have, by this point, your posing well figured out. If not, I mean, it's not the time to like change the game here. You're going to drive up a lot more fatigue because posing is very taxing. And we had a recent paper that looked at this too, that posing was classified as vigorous intensity cardio with about 100 calorie burn per 15 minutes. So if you're doing 3 sessions a day, that's easily 300 calories for some individuals. So anyway, during this phase is when I would start tapering down posing as well to just doing 1 session. Then leading into your peak week, I'm just pulling this back down to only posing during check-ins, because you're going to have multiple check-ins, and that alone is going to be enough posing, because I don't want guys getting fatigued just like flexing their legs and stuff the whole time. So as you start moving into this, like posing should be getting pulled down as well, not tapered back up.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like the mad dash to figure out the posing is like my pet peeve. And like we started, working with Cody and having him doing a lot of the posing for the guys. And I think it's something that can make a peak messy, because then you have someone like doing the call with their posing coach and then posing for you and then posing for you again. And then if you're not even thinking about it, they end up like, if you're not aware of this, right, they end up posing for you 4 or 5 times and then they pose with their posing coach. It's like they're wrecked.
I start asking for like bare minimum poses and check-ins. Like, give me quarters, then I'll have like, give me a front double, side chest, and a rear double. 7 poses. I want nothing more. I don't want selfies. I don't want bullshit. Just give me 7 poses. That's all I want.
I know I've confused some athletes in the past, because I'll message them. I'll be like, I've got my poses that are their telltales, right?
Yeah.
I'll be like, just send me a side chest and front double. And they'll be like, you just want those 2? I'm like, yeah, just send them, because that's all I need to see to know where you're at. It's like whatever those 2 poses or 3 poses are, right? And it's more from my perspective, trying to keep them from posing themselves to death. And like, by the time I've gotten to this point in peak week, I know you so well, I could probably peak you falling asleep, but I've got your weight matrix. I know what your weight's at. I want to confirm that with the visuals to make sure this matrix is correct. I know which poses are going to stand out the most, either fullness or flatness, and I'm just going to ask for those. Like, it's just, you get to a point during peak week where just like chasing this posing thing just becomes a little bit pointless.
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking about what poses I look at for myself, and if I have a most muscular and a rear double, that's all I need to be able to tell, like, fullness from the front, that's the tall tale sign, condition from the back, it's all I need there. That gives me everything I need if I'm ready or not. So, yeah, it can get pretty simple. You're not like doing a bad job as a coach looking at every single pose, because the posing should already be done.
Yeah.
At this point, it's just making sure you have the right visuals to assess fullness versus condition. So,
100%. Well, yeah, that's it, man. Is that everything for today?
Yeah. That is your peaking before peak week, and hopefully that helps everyone lead into their shows in a much better position and remove a lot of the peaking variables and bring those to a maintenance level to makes it really simple once you do get in peak week. And I think that will remove a lot of the mysticism around pulling all the variable levers that make a really complicated peak and make you miss the mark. You're like, wow, peak week is really tough. It's like, it's because you're trying to move all the variables at one time. But if you spread out the peaking timeline and shift one at a time, you understand what each one does, and it makes it a lot more understandable for you then to arrive at the look that you want to put on stage. So use these strategies. If you need to learn more, we have all about this in J3U Level 1. And then for next week, which I know the previous week we mentioned, we're going to talk about what happens after your show. Well, we didn't do that because we needed to hit this one first. But for next week, we will talk about what to do after your show, that first 7-day period afterwards. So tune in next week. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you then.